Welcome to Locally Grown In, a podcast on a mission to help entrepreneurs growing food locally. Every episode, we feature a different city, and we go through the data on opportunities and challenges in growing food in that city. We interview movers and shakers and connect you with the opportunities to grow local food. Welcome back, everyone. Before I reveal which city we're going to be talking about today, even though you may have seen it in the description, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Jeffrey Landau. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Henry. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited to be here back in the basement at Agrotech speaking with you, my colleague. It's different when you're around Jeffrey.
Oh, no.
So Jeffrey, let's talk about what you do at Agrotech. What's your title and what kind of work do you do?
I am our Director of Business Development. My role in the company is to work with our leads to better understand their goals and objectives as we go about building out their urban agricultural project.
And so what kind of projects are you working on right now with Agrotech? You've been working on some of our projects around the world, so give our audience a taste of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I just got back from an incredible trip in the country of Kosovo. Who knows where Kosovo is? Listeners, take a second, think about it. All right, it's in the Balkans. Great choice, love it. So we got hired to do some in-field research with our client to better understand the challenges that Kosovar farmers face when it comes to horticultural and greenhouse operations.
Mostly greenhouses, right? I saw on your Insta you're visiting a lot of greenhouses.
Yes, all greenhouses, all soil-based, very few hydroponic operations out there. We actually only saw one.
Cool. And you're working on another greenhouse project, right? Somewhere else, this time in the United States?
Yeah, so another project that I'm working on is for a client based out in Oklahoma. This is a gourmet boutique hot sauce company that is trying to better understand how they can source their ingredients in-house by growing locally next to their packing plant.
Awesome. So let's move to the city of our episode, Atlanta, which is where you and I met, and I think where you were studying long before we met, and you heard about Agrotech. What's the story?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate degree at Georgia Tech, mechanical engineering, and through that, I saw a newspaper clipping for a nonprofit that was doing hydroponic installations for elementary schools in the Atlanta area. And that led me to discover the blog Agrotech, and through that discovery, I just opened my eyes to the world of vertical farming worldwide. And through that, I noticed there was an upcoming Atlanta Agritecture workshop.
I hope you're listening carefully, folks. If you share Agrotech with others, you may be opening their eyes to the potential for vertical farming and inspiring them through global examples. That's our purpose. You know, I am paying you, but I didn't pay you to say that.
No, it's true. It's true. I was reading Agrotech daily, trying to better understand, who are the key players in the industry, how can I get involved, and that led me to this workshop, which led me to where I am now.
Yeah, I really like sharing your journey, and we're going to go a little bit deeper because I think it embodies kind of the typical journey of a young person finding out about ag tech and their pathway into it, which is what we're also a lot about. So, then you kind of started working, right? You were working at a hydro store, you were doing some other projects, and you came to the workshop. Tell us briefly about the workshop and your experience there.
Yeah, so the workshop, it was a 2-day design competition where I was placed on a team of 9 other individuals, and we were given one site, 8 hours to design a vertical farm operation facility.
Yeah, and then you won. Your team won. And I think it was really a good sign to me because I saw you were a great presenter. You had really a lot of engineering detail in your designs, and you had brought your team together as a leader. And so I was like, okay, that guy's going to work for me. And also the workshops are kind of built around our methodology. So it was really a good sign about how you were going to be able to manage our phases as we work with clients to help them determine the feasibility of their projects. So fast forward, we moved you to New York City. You've been working with us for 4 years now, 3.5 years. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think just over 3 years.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Exciting.
As we sit here in our second office.
It's good to look back sometimes. And then we started working with Atlanta, right? Almost immediately after we hired you, started working with Atlanta. Talk a little bit about that. How did we connect with Mario Gambardella, the Director of Urban Agriculture, and what's some of the early work we started focusing on?
Before I left for New York City, I was given the opportunity to sit down with the city of Atlanta's urban agricultural director, one of the first in North America, and how agriculture could better play a role in supporting his vision for a more resilient urban food system in Atlanta.
Yeah, I remember the first time we started talking with Mario about how agriculture could work with him to strengthen food resilience in Atlanta. And we had such a clearly shared vision. What I mean by that is we really wanted to encourage all types of urban agriculture, not just high-tech farming and not just low-tech community gardening. We at Agrotech want to promote that whole spectrum. I've mentioned it a couple different times. And so that was a really great shared vision. So when we started thinking about the first Aglanta conference, which was really our first engagement with the city, we really wanted to make sure a couple things happened. We wanted to make sure that this event represented the population, meaning that it was diverse. We also wanted to make sure that it represented both the community gardeners and the high-tech farmers. So after we did that first year, we then signed up again to do a second year, and now we're working on year 3. Atlanta 2019, Create, Pilot, Grow. We'll be talking a little bit more about that in a bit. But in between that, we worked with Southern Company, who's been a major sponsor and supporter of the Atlanta initiative, the conference itself. We're extremely grateful for their support, but also has been a client of ours. And we had the great honor of working with them and seeing how they want to accelerate urban ag tech in the whole region. It was really interesting because they're a utility company and they talk about their benefits and the incentives they want to create to attract high-tech farmers that typically use large amounts of energy. You know, we often think about vertical farms as kind of being these huge energy hogs, and when would that ever make sense environmentally? But actually in certain parts of the world, there's excess energy on the grid. So what I mean is you kind of build a big energy production plant, then you're kind of using that energy, but you have excess on it. And what typically is done with that excess is it's sold at pennies on the dollar to other states or other customers. So who's really winning on that? As the energy moves, it's actually transmitted and lost. And so you lose energy, you lose efficiency. So if you can keep that energy locally near the plant, you can actually have more efficiency. So, you know, Stan Van Gilder, who leads innovation at Southern Company, had this brilliant idea of saying, well, why don't we have the vertical farms do it? And we can turn that excess energy into fresh food, which is something that Atlanta needs a lot of. So we've done quite a bit of work in Atlanta.
Yeah, significant amount. And I think what's also interesting to touch on, you know, Georgia is known as the peach state, but a few of the leading agricultural exports for the state are actually pecans and peanuts, as well as cotton. But, you know, locally or within the state, there's very limited commercial production of leafy greens that can help support the state. So there's not only an economic incentive, but a food health incentive for these farmers and these operators to start growing more fresh produce for Georgia.
Yeah, and it was pretty exciting to see Commissioner Black speak at past Atlanta conferences about the economic opportunity that exists in growing food in Georgia and that there is so little leafy green production. So, you know, in Georgia, you're actually probably not going to be buying a locally grown leafy green, even though it's very plausible to do that in greenhouses, vertical farms, and even some outdoor options. So there's a real, again, going back to what locally grown in is all about, there's a real economic opportunity around that. Whenever you're planning your farm, look at the gaps. What's imported? What's not being grown here? Because local is hot right now, and that's your opportunity to build a business around that gap.
As climate change continues to take a toll on our food landscapes, cities are going to be needing to play a bigger role in how they support and build a more resilient food system. Hurricane Michael in the last year did an estimated worth of $500 million of damage to vegetable crops just alone to the state of Georgia, which is a huge toll and loss to the farmers and residents there that are looking for security in their food source. I think what's great about the city of Atlanta working with 100 Resilient Cities, they have identified the importance that food plays a role within the city. And really, you know, how can you have a smart city if you don't consider how that city is fed and where that food's coming from? So a city that is forward thinking and looking at policies and initiatives that incentivizes its residents not only to grow for themselves, but to grow for others will really be able to tackle and take on the challenges that climate change will play, not only now, but as it progresses in the future.
That's exactly right, Jeffrey. So while the climate is changing and our farmers are at risk, simultaneously we have food insecurity in the city. And when we look at the data around Atlanta, the recent 2016 report showed about 20%, I've seen some for 25% of the population is considered food insecure. That's a huge percentage of a city that's on the rise and developing. And as those pressures from climate change get worse, those people are going to even be pushed into more insecure situations. And that's why the work of Mario, Atlanta, and the Office of Resilience is so important, and why so many cities can learn from what Atlanta is doing and need to go to Atlanta and see what they're doing firsthand. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper with an interview with an urban farmer in Atlanta, Maurice Small. Before I get into this interview with Maurice, I just want to say this guy is like an urban ag hero to me. When you see him, he's got the farmer look, he's glowing like he's been working on the soil all day, and he's got this warm, earthy aura about him. He just makes you feel so welcome. And I remember at the Atlanta conference last year, he grabbed me and he said, Henry, I know you're super busy, but I just want you to know that what you're doing is making a real difference. And I wanted to take a moment to tell you that. And I just hugged him. We just had this moment. I think that community is what Atlanta is all about. And that's what you don't see in every other city, is you see people really talking about the business, the best practices, the science, the technology, but then you see people hugging, you see people collaborating and connecting. And that's what food is about. That's what agriculture is about. And Maurice represents that for me. And that's why he's the only interview we're doing today on Locally Grown In.
Are you in the basement in Brooklyn?
That's the only quiet place. It's like where all the magic happens.
That's right. That's where the alchemy is, in the basement.
Exactly. So I'll do a brief introduction, then we'll get into the first questions.
Okay.
So we're talking to Maurice Small. Maurice Small is a farmer, trainer of farmers, soil alchemist, and worm whisperer based in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also a farming consultant. He helps entrepreneurs develop urban spaces, community groups work on the ground, and he is very involved in youth leadership and the Atlanta program. How are you doing, Maurice?
Doing well. How are you, Henry?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm excited to talk to you. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I light up a little bit because you have such a positive energy, even if it's just on Twitter or wherever I see it happening. And I'm really excited because we're going to be seeing each other soon in Atlanta at the Atlanta conference.
It'll be a good reunion for sure.
Yeah, reunion. That's what it's all about. So, yeah, I really want to talk about Atlanta and your work. So first of all, can you introduce us a little bit more into who you are, how you got involved in agriculture, and what you do?
The wonderful part about what it is that I do is that it's become this magical love of the earth and the people that are on the earth. And the start happened when my oldest son was born 30 years ago. And my dad taught me how to do work in the soil, but he didn't teach me. He just taught me and showed me. And my dad passed away when I was young, so I didn't learn those techniques and secrets. And fortunately, the neighborhood that I was living in, a few of my neighbors and I started a community garden, and we killed everything, and we killed it really bad. And the second year, we killed it again. So I was like, this is not going to work. We aren't successful. We got to figure out a way to do this better. And there was an older guy from, not Kentucky, there was an older guy from West Virginia. And he would stand by the fence and look over the fence and spit tobacco and smile and keep on walking. One day he said, you know what you ought to do? And I said, what? He said, you ought to look at each leaf like $1. And I said, what do you mean? He said, each leaf is $1. If you invest it, you get a return. So he said, come down to my house. So I went down to his house, and he had a 50 by 50 area behind his house, and it was full of leaves, like a foot of leaves. And he said, every autumn, I just collect every leaf I can and put it into this hole. And then in the spring, I rake it away, and then I plant. And I said, that's it? He was like, yeah, that's it. So this older guy from West Virginia taught me about the simplicity of putting stuff back in. My job right now working with Atlanta is to put stuff back in. Our communities are so deficient with so many things. My job is to put stuff back in, put farmers back in, put compost back in, put love back in, put soil back in. put hope and dreams back in. And working with the Atlanta program, which is working with a number of farmers on vacant land within the city borders, has been a dream come true because we're a major metropolitan city in the South. Everyone's looking at us as an example. So we have to be as successful as we can, and we have to be able to put back the dreams and the hopes of what once was, and bringing back health and bringing back farms and bringing back healthy soil and hopefully bringing back controlled environment agriculture. This will be able to put us into places where we can't farm, i.e. schools, nursing homes, senior centers, after school programs. We need to be everywhere with our food, not just outdoors, but inside as well.
So what about those policy developments in Atlanta? You know, we've got the Grows a Lot program, for example. We've got the Atlanta kind of project with the Director of Urban Agriculture, Mario. What's your take on these initiatives and their importance in encouraging the local food system, and how it's worked for you and the people you work with in Atlanta?
If we keep moving forward, we can't help but be successful. And the goal of the program is to increase food access. And it's also to increase the policy issues that are hurting or slowing down the process of growing food in certain communities. The initiatives that all the farmers and all the people at City Hall, and even now the county and our quiet partners like Georgia Power, there's a way that we can all move forward with creating an updated policy that benefits everyone, not just a few, but everyone. And there's a lot of momentum, but it's a slow grind because it is about policy, and we have to craft it in such a way that it hits where it needs to hit, the most important pieces first. And then secondary, we need to look at it as how are we going to implement it and make people aware of what their options are, let alone their rights.
What are some of the changes you've seen as far as people's engagement in agriculture? You know, you've been doing this for a while. How has it kind of evolved?
What's changed is it's become sexy. Farming has never been sexy until now. So the past, 20 years has been this immediate upswing of, wow, I too can be a sexy person because I farm, I grow my own food. Well, people have been growing their own food for thousands of years, and growing your own food is hard. This is hard work. It's sexy, it's hard, and the change comes when people begin to feel it in their souls. As it is now, some people have access to food, and this access to food gives them, a good feeling. Knowing your farmer gives you a good feeling. The change happens, I believe, when people begin to talk to each other across all the lines, LGBTQ, across the lines of wealth, across the lines of race, across the lines. And as you talk to each other about food, I believe that that's where the true change happens. And as long as we come to the table every day, and as long as we come to the table and there's something on it that we each bring, because we all have assets, that's when we can see the change and be the change like Gandhi was talking about.
And that, bringing people to the table and kind of understanding other people's perspective is really what the Atlanta conference, which is happening on April 14th and 15th, is all about. We're different in this event because we encourage more diversity. We have commitments to a significant percentage of the audience and the speakers being people of color, more commitment to diversity of female voices, women in ag. And this is something that unfortunately, we have to put extra energy into because so much of this industry is moving to the high-tech approach. Now, I'm not opposed to that. I know, well, you're laughing, but it's true. What are you laughing at? It's true, right?
I'm laughing because of the truth of it. We don't talk about it. Keep talking, man.
I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it with you. That's why we're talking about it. So, but one of the challenges is that you have this kind of high-tech approach that's developing that obviously people like myself, white men with privilege, have the capability to raise money in different ways. We have opportunities around education, which we were given advantage of. And so that's kind of developing separate, unfortunately, from a lot of the needs of the community. I don't think it needs to be that way, but there is also this challenge between the community's history. How are you seeing these two different camps, let's say, interacting or maybe even conflicting in the context of Atlanta?
There is a mentality, and a lot of the mentality comes from what we've been taught. And as we teach things over the generations and the decades, we begin to see a continuation of what was. Change, as we just spoke about, is difficult. It hurts. It's painful. It hurts to look at it sometimes. I believe that we can look at change as being one of the better things. Integrating certain pieces of change into a community needs to be slow and deliberate. Change agents like yourself and your team are able to traverse the world and create change in an audience that is welcoming that change. It's difficult for people to understand what controlled environment agriculture is because they haven't been able to embrace what used to be called farming, i.e. slavery, back in the day. In these marginalized communities, there's a wellspring of knowledge, but it hurts to go back to think about what that knowledge is and was. I believe that we can move forward with change via our youth. And the importance of the Atlanta conference this coming April, I'm looking to see more youth, and I'm looking to connect with more youth because they're the ones that I met last year at the conference that have worked on hydroponics and aquaponics systems in their patio up in Buckhead. They're the ones that have worked on these controlled environment systems in Bankhead. These young people are the ones that are going to bring the change and keep the earth moving forward environmentally, consciously, and spiritually forward.
I really appreciate you saying that we're change makers because that's what I strive to be, and I strive to inspire like you do and democratize the knowledge. But I've had some pushback in New York, for example, because food is so connected to race. And let me just tell you a story. So New York, we pushed forward by creating a collective of urban farms. We invited some nonprofits and community gardens. And, you know, with their busy schedules and for whatever reason, they didn't really show up to those meetings at the beginning. And I don't know exactly why. But we moved forward as people who are mostly focused on the business and the high-tech approach to try and make the city change policy to make it easier for farms to be developed. And in our discussions, we encouraged community gardening as well. We didn't exclude it. But then when it came to the point that we actually got to city council, the community gardeners came out in force and said, you don't speak for us. You can't make these decisions. You can't make these recommendations. And so we invited them back to the table and we revisited and worked on the plan. But when we were back at the table, you know, I was called a white biotech farmer. I was interrupted when I was speaking, and I was told, you know, I'm sorry for interrupting you again, but I've been interrupted by white people my entire life, so I'm not going to apologize for it. Very, what I felt was very tense, you know, conversations. And I'm not trying to name names. I really want to understand how to navigate this more in the future because it is a challenge. And so what we did is we stepped back and we replaced my role with a female person of color who was a CEO of a private company working in the ag tech space. And there was just a lot of education that was missing. You know, we're not biotech farmers, we're ag tech. You know, there's a difference there. And we are doing our own, diversity does matter to us. I think we can do more to work on that. But how do you be an ally if you're working in the ag tech space to, you know, in this context of the systemic racism and really the connection to food and agriculture, to slavery and that history? You know, how can you make a difference? Is it that you should work in the background and kind of try and support and elevate people of color instead of, you know, trying to move maybe top down, which can kind of be a replication of the past? What are some ideas to be a change maker if you're in a position of privilege in the context of local food?
Great question, Henry. There's and you wanted to get deep. I knew you were deep. I knew it from LinkedIn. I was like, this is not a regular person. This guy, he always goes hard and he always goes into it. This question was one of the best questions I've had posed to me all year. And we have to look at where we are. Women are still paid, 40% less than men in any position, let alone executive positions. If a dude's making $1 million a year, the lady's making, 400,000, 500,000. How come we aren't addressing that first? If the white actor in Hollywood is making $2 million per film, how come Samuel L. Jackson only gets, 400,000? On and on and on. Why? This is the question. It gets back to who we are as a country and what our values are. There's something about how we address something and how often we address it. If we treat ourselves like we treat our mouths and our stomach, I believe that we can address something a little bit faster, but we treat it once a month, or we treat it every 3 months, or we treat it when Congress is in session, which is bullcrap. We have to treat these issues every freaking day like we eat, like we drink water. Your comment about being called a white biotech farmer, people just don't understand. They have an idea because of what they see, but they don't know you. They don't know your team. They don't know the work you're doing to create smaller systems as you're in Dubai doing a larger system to prove a point and a theory. I know you guys are doing smaller work in schools. You're doing smaller work in smaller communities. As a result, people, I feel, should not speak like that, but their frustration comes out and they are hurt, and there's not a way to express themselves because of their voice being, i.e. women, their voice being people of color, la. And they have an opportunity to speak, and they speak the hurtful words. It's a tough situation, and I applaud you for going back to the table and bringing on someone else who can potentially address the situation so that more education can happen. I feel that with that situation of education, and that's all it is education, we need to have programming in which the people that are sharing the education look like the people that are receiving the education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And while progress has to happen, and you can't slow down progress because someone's not aware, as a result, sometimes, Henry, I think we have to move forward, train up those that can stay behind, keep in touch with them, keep them up to speed, bring them out, have them for dinner, and then, keep checking in, because all hope is not lost. All hope is not lost in Brooklyn. All hope is not lost with people that don't quite speak the same language. We have to develop certain ways to speak to everyone as teachers, to make it plain and make it simple and keep moving. We just can't stay in one spot. We have to keep moving, and those that want to receive the message will receive it, and those that aren't ready for it will still be there when their messenger arrives.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great points. And I definitely want to say that I understand where the frustration came from in these discussions. Community gardens have been oppressed for a long time here in New York, had a difficult time. And, there's this new group, this new kind of generation that's focused on technology that's coming in. I understand where the frustration comes. And I think that you're right, that education needs to come from people they trust. And I think that there's unique ways to do that. Teams for Food Justice is one organization where I contribute, which I feel like has a better focus for my energy. We basically give pro bono consulting to them as they develop vertical farms in classrooms in at-risk youth communities. And the farmers that run those operations are typically representative of the community. And so that education is happening in a more appropriate way. And I think those are really, really good tips about how you can be an ally, but not necessarily be kind of a savior, which is not what is really what's needed.
Right.
You need to often work in the background and support. But for me, it's really important. Like, this is a really important mission of mine, because when I see the community gardens and I see them, they're so abundant and lush here in New York in the warm season, and in the winter they shut down. I think about the loss of the safe space for the kids in my community in Bushwick that use Bushwick City Farm, my local community garden. And I see that they miss that in the wintertime. I also see that they don't really have the long-term job opportunity. I'm not saying there isn't jobs in soil-based agriculture. Of course there are, but there are an emerging set of jobs in high-tech urban agriculture, like greenhouses and vertical farms. And so if we don't provide that education to those communities that lack the jobs and often lack the food access, they're not getting the opportunity to find jobs in this emerging industry. And so, maybe talk to me a little about how you see that playing out in Atlanta. You talked about some schools, some hospitals. Are you seeing youth, people of color that are getting excited about the technology piece and innovating on it?
Jumping back into here in Atlanta, I just now got access to a number of schools, not in Atlanta public schools, but the Decatur public schools. And the joy of that system is that the principals are 100% behind it. The teachers that I'm involved with are 100% behind it. And it goes back to what I was doing when I was living in Raleigh. We had a school system that had a principal and a director, a board of directors that was not part of Wake County Public Schools. They were privately held and they were privately operating, working with the worst of the students that Wake County couldn't educate. So putting me into the school system with youth that had to see the parole officer every other day, youth that had criminal records and on and on and on, these youth responded amazingly well to indoor classroom hydroponics. These students responded amazingly well to outdoor growing in the soil and composting in bees and a hoop house and aquaponics in the greenhouse and on and on and on. These students responded amazingly well with their parole officers and the judges because their attitudes had shifted. And these were 14 to 19-year-olds. And they were at that point of either you can go this way and be in prison for the next 5 years, or you can go this way and try to do it. What we did was we were able to turn some of these youth into entrepreneurs, and they were able to turn their backyards into food systems. What we did was we educated them to the highest degree as far as language, as far as materials, as far as visiting other local hydroponics in the Raleigh general area, Raleigh, North Carolina general area. These youth and the principals were able to eat lunch together. What school system do you know where the teachers eat lunch with the students?
Yeah.
The teachers have their own freaking cubicle. The students eat in the freaking pen. They don't eat together. This was the case where the students cooked what they grew and served it to the teachers and the principal. Unheard of. As a result, the students were able to pass their tests. As a result, the students were able to pass their piss test, which is important because they were staying clean. As a result, we had good results that year. As a result, we were able to prove the model to be fluid. And as a result, I believe that these systems that we did back in Raleigh can take place here in Atlanta because it's a larger number of people here, number one. Number two, I've never seen so many principals that are gung-ho about having hydroponics and aquaponics in their schools. And number three, the students that we're working with just far, and it's only been a few months, these students, they have embraced the concept. We haven't set anything up yet, but they've embraced the concept of what indoor hydroponics is. They've seen the videos, they've seen other students like them. So they're not looking at some other kids from another class, as far as economic class, doing it. They're looking at kids that are in Raleigh doing it. They're looking at their uncles and aunts and so forth, the kids in North Carolina doing it. And these students are like, yeah, it looks like my uncle. This gets back to that piece of if you have people educating them that look like them, they're likely to grab onto it and run with it because there's not this disconnect.
Yeah, I think you talk a lot about, again, that restoration. And I think that's part of it is democratizing this knowledge and restoring it to communities that need it and allowing them be the leaders, the trainers, the educators in that. And I think just my advice to any entrepreneurs out there that are listening, I have a for-profit business, but there's things you can do that you can give back with to be part of the solution. Agrotech worked with a lot of schools at the beginning, some nonprofits. We installed a vertical farm and a food bank, things like that. But as our business got bigger, we had to focus on a lot of the big projects, like you mentioned, around the world, Maurice, in Dubai and elsewhere. So we said, well, what can we do for all these schools that are reaching out? And we designed a DIY, no-frills vertical farming system called Plus Farm, built some instructions for it, how to build it, how to take care of it, some of the basics. It's 100% online, free at www.plus.farm. So you can go to the hardware store, you can find different options, but above all, you can kind of hack it. You can come up with your own way. You can learn the principles and come up with your own innovations. And I think that that's just one example of how any for-profit company can contribute a little bit more with the knowledge they have. And so it was a no-brainer for us. And I hope that inspires some people listening to come up with their own solutions to contribute, because it really is important that we don't repeat the same mistakes of big ag when it comes to urban ag. And that means marginalizing communities. That means not democratizing the knowledge around it, and focusing too much on greed, essentially. Maurice, we really want to inspire entrepreneurs to find gaps and opportunities in the food system with this podcast, and think of it from a really strategic perspective on the opportunities, but also help them understand, that this is challenging and there's a learning curve around it. What advice do you have to somebody who wants to develop an urban or local farm in or around Atlanta?
The advice comes from years of experience, and humbly, we have to fail. And the only way you fail is if you try. And when you try and you fail, you learn. You have to get out there and do it. You have to raise your $2,000 from friends and family and do it. You have to leverage your 3 months of concept growing into a year of funding. You have to figure out a way, but you have to do it. You have to get it on paper roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't got to be that dossier. It doesn't have to be whatever. You just have to get an idea, write it down, and live it. You have to believe and see it. You have to actuate the seeds, the water, the fish, the controls. You have to do it. If you don't do it and you think about it every day, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to see it, and you have to surround yourself with a team of people that also see your same vision. Your vision is unique, but it's also shared by people that you don't know. Find these people. As you're dreaming about it, go out and find them. Talk about what your dream is. Think about who these people look like. And suddenly, this might sound bizarre to some people, but if you visualize it, it becomes reality. But you have to walk towards it, and you have to open that door, and you have to walk through the door, close the door behind you, and get busy. Open the door, come out, grab somebody else, come back in behind that door and get busy. Soon you have a team, and soon you have a belief system, and soon you have the reality of what your dream was. And now the checks are coming in, and now the people are getting fed, and now. Soon you'll see yourself at the Atlanta 2019, because you have less than 30 days to get there. As a result, if you don't get there this year, there's always next year. I want to meet y'all there. I want to see you there. I want to hear about your dreams. I want to be able to introduce you to people that I've met that have been influencing my life in the past 2 years since I've been down here with the Atlanta program. There is an opportunity that you have to take, but you have to go for it. And you have to go for it strong, because if you don't, it's just a dream.
Maurice, you inspire me so much. I could listen to you for hours, and I'm excited to catch up. We should make some more time this year at Atlanta to really spend some bit more time together talking. And I really love what you said about manifesting. As far as my story goes, I really started to imagine the impact I wanted to make on the world. And I started putting that down onto paper, and I started drawing the farms I wanted to work on and the things I wanted to design and build. And I have to say that when you put the work in, like you said, it happens. I think that's a real power. It's in some ways, it's similar to the soil. When you invest in it, it gives back to you. But if you don't invest in it, it won't give back to you. And I think you all need to take that leap, be smart, be ready to fail, but it starts with that vision and that first step towards your urban agriculture and local food system impact. If you want to learn more about Maurice Small and the amazing work he does in Atlanta and beyond, go to www.mauricesmall.com. And also, if you want to see some of the inspiring tweets I've been talking about, you can follow @smallfarms on Twitter. That's farms with a Z, or a Z as they call it in Europe. And it's really great to talk with you, Maurice. So inspired by everything you do, and I look forward to catching up in Atlanta.
Henry, it'll be a good time when I see you again in April. And thank you for your time. Thank you for the concepts that you put out across the world. And I wish everyone that's hearing this podcast peace and blessings, and manifest what it is you need to have happen in your life, because it can work and it can help all of us.
That was just a snippet of what's going to be happening at this year's Atlanta conference. To learn more, go to www.atlanta.org/Atlanta Conference 2019.
You can also find out more about the Atlanta Conference at Atlanta Grown on Instagram, or check out Agtech X or Agrotech, who are co-producing the event this year. I want to thank our amazing team at Locally Grown In here today. I want to thank Jeffrey Landau, our co-host today. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Anytime, Henry.
You'll be back. I want to thank Brianna on the audio. Yep, she's dancing. And I want to thank Susie Ju, our intern who leads our research for Locally Grown In episodes. You can find out more about the links and the data behind our stories by going to agrotech.com and looking at our podcast page. We want to thank you for listening today to Locally Grown In. This podcast is all about you. So please subscribe and please send us your questions as well as additional cities you want us to feature on Locally Grown In. Thanks for listening.